The morning air felt crisp and cool as Tom walked through the forest. Fall had painted the trees in bright colors of red, orange, and gold. Tom had been hunting in these woods for most of his life, over 20 years now. He knew every trail, every clearing, and most of the animals that called this place home. Today he woke up earlier than usual. The stars were still out when he left his small cabin at the edge of town. He wanted to try a new spot deeper in the woods where his buddy had spotted some deer last week. Tom moved slowly and carefully, his boots barely making a sound on the leaf-covered ground. His father had taught him how to walk in the forest without scaring away the animals. It's like dancing with nature, his dad used to say. You have to listen to its rhythm. After about 2 hours of walking, Tom spotted some fresh deer tracks. His heart beat a little faster. He was getting close. He followed the tracks, his experienced eyes never leaving the ground. The forest grew thicker here, with tall pine trees blocking most of the sunlight. Just as he was about to cross a small stream, Tom heard something. He stopped and held his breath. Years of hunting had trained his ears to pick up the smallest sounds. This wasn't the usual forest noise, not the wind in the trees or animals moving around. It was a whimper, soft and sad, like someone or something in pain. Tom forgot about the deer tracks. He turned toward the sound, pushing through thick bushes that scratched at his jacket. The whimpering got louder as he got closer. It was definitely an animal, but what kind? He stepped into a small clearing, and that's when he saw it. A dog tied to a large oak tree. Tom had seen many sad things in his life, but this made his stomach drop. The dog, a brown Labrador, looked half-starved. Its ribs showed through its dirty coat, and its eyes had that hollow look of an animal that had given up hope. "Hey there, buddy," Tom said in a soft voice, the one he used with scared animals. The dog's ears perked up at the sound of a human voice, but it quickly lowered its head again. It had been hurt by people before, Tom could tell. He approached slowly, careful not to make any sudden moves. The rope around the dog's neck was thick and rough, tied so tight it had rubbed the fur away, leaving raw skin underneath. Tom felt anger bubbling up inside him. Who would do this to an animal and just leave it here to die? The dog watched him with careful eyes as Tom knelt down about 10 feet away. He didn't want to scare it more than it already was. "I'm not going to hurt you," he said, keeping his voice calm and even. "I'm here to help." Tom reached into his pack and pulled out a packet of beef jerky he had brought for lunch. He broke off a small piece and held it out. The dog's nose twitched, catching the smell of food, but it didn't move. Tom placed the jerky on the ground and pushed it toward the dog with a stick. Then he backed away a few steps. The dog looked at the food, then at Tom, then back at the food. Its hunger finally won out over its fear. It stretched as far as the rope would allow and quickly gobbled up the jerky. "That's it," Tom encouraged. "Good dog." He repeated this a few times, each time getting a little closer. After about 20 minutes, he was able to sit just a few feet from the dog. It was still wary, but no longer trembling in fear. As Tom got closer, he noticed things that seemed odd. This wasn't just a case of someone abandoning an unwanted pet. There was a half-empty water bowl nearby, fresh boot prints in the mud that couldn't be more than a day old. Someone had been here recently. The dog wore a worn leather collar that looked expensive once. Something was tucked inside the fold of the collar. A piece of paper? "Let's get you free first," Tom said, pulling out his hunting knife. The dog shrank back at the sight of the blade, but Tom moved slowly, showing the animal what he was doing. "I'm just going to cut this rope, okay? Then we can figure out what's going on here." It took some careful work to cut through the thick rope without scaring the dog or hurting it more. When the last strand broke, the dog stayed put, as if it didn't realize it was free. "Come on, you can move now," Tom said gently. The dog stood up on shaky legs. It took a tentative step, then another. It had been tied up for so long that walking seemed strange. Tom held out another piece of jerky in his open palm. This time the dog limped over and took it directly from his hand. As it ate, Tom carefully checked its body. The dog was skinny but not dying. Someone had been feeding it, at least a little. But why keep a dog tied up in the middle of nowhere? With gentle fingers, Tom examined the collar and found what he had seen earlier. A folded piece of paper tucked into a small pocket on the inside of the collar. The paper was damp from rain and morning dew, but he could still make out some writing. An address partly washed away and a name, Daisy. "Is that your name, girl?" "Daisy?" At the sound of the name, the dog's tail gave a small wag. "Well, Daisy, let's figure out what's going on." Tom looked around more carefully now. This spot was really out of the way, at least 5 miles from the nearest road. Nobody would come here by accident. Whoever left Daisy here wanted her hidden but alive. It didn't make sense. As Tom examined the area, he noticed something else strange. The ground around the tree had been disturbed, like someone had been digging. And Daisy had unusual marks on her paws. Not just dirt, but some kind of chemical burn that had partly healed. Tom pulled out his phone to call for help but had no signal this deep in the woods. He'd have to take Daisy back with him. Come on, girl. Let's get you somewhere safe. Daisy followed Tom hesitantly at first, stopping every few steps to look back at the tree, as if she was supposed to stay there. But the smell of more jerky in Tom's pocket kept her moving forward. As they walked, Tom remembered something he'd heard at the diner last week. People talking about private land not far from here that had been in the news. Something about water testing and a missing person. He hadn't paid much attention then. Local gossip wasn't really his thing. But now, with this dog appearing out of nowhere with strange injuries, Tom's gut told him something wasn't right. They had been walking for about 30 minutes when Daisy suddenly stopped. Her ears stood up and the fur on her back rose. She turned to look back the way they had come, a low growl building in her throat. Tom listened too. For a moment he heard nothing but the normal forest sounds. Then a twig snapped. Someone was following them. "Let's move, Daisy," Tom whispered, picking up his pace. The dog seemed to understand the urgency and stayed close to his side. They reached Tom's truck parked at the forest edge faster than he expected. Daisy needed help getting into the passenger seat, her legs too weak to make the jump. Once inside, she pressed herself against the door, as far from Tom as possible, but her eyes never left him. As Tom started the engine, he noticed a mud-splattered black truck parked about 100 yards down the road. It hadn't been there when he arrived that morning. Something about it made the hair on the back of his neck stand up. "Let's get you to a vet," Tom said to Daisy as he pulled onto the dirt road. In his rearview mirror, he saw a man emerge from the trees, watching them drive away. The man pulled out a phone. Tom gripped the steering wheel tighter. Finding Daisy wasn't an accident. It was the beginning of something bigger. And as he drove toward town with the frightened dog beside him, Tom couldn't shake the feeling that cutting that rope had set something serious in motion. Daisy's head suddenly perked up as they passed a turnoff. She barked, the first sound she'd made besides whimpering, and pawed at the window. "What is it, girl?" Tom asked, slowing down slightly. The road sign indicated Miller Chemical Storage, private property. Tom looked at Daisy, then at the sign, then at the strange burns on her paws. "Well, Daisy," he said, his voice firm with new resolve, "I think we need to find out exactly what happened to you and why someone wanted to keep you hidden in those woods." As they drove toward town, neither of them noticed the black truck that had pulled onto the road behind them, keeping a careful distance. The small-town animal clinic was quiet when Tom pulled into the parking lot. Daisy had fallen asleep during the drive, her head resting against the window. She woke up instantly when the engine stopped, her body tense and alert again. "It's okay, girl," Tom said softly. "We're getting you some help." The receptionist looked up from her computer when they walked in. Her eyes widened at the sight of the skinny dog with patchy fur. "Oh my goodness, what happened to this poor thing?" she asked, coming around the desk. "Found her tied to a tree in Blackwater Forest," Tom explained. "Been there a while, I think." "Dr. Pat can see you right away," she said, leading them to an exam room. "We're not busy today." Dr. Pat was a woman in her 50s who had been the town's only vet for as long as Tom could remember. She had treated Tom's hunting dogs over the years and never sugar-coated anything. "Well, what do we have here?" she asked, entering the room. Her kind eyes took in Daisy's condition with a professional gaze. Tom explained how he found Daisy while hunting that morning. He mentioned the fresh boot prints, the water bowl, and the note in the collar with the name Daisy, and a partial address. "Can I see the note?" Dr. Pat asked, gently examining Daisy's neck where the rope had rubbed it raw. Tom handed her the damp paper. "Can't make out much of the address. Just says Pine Ridge and then it's smudged." Dr. Pat frowned. "Pine Ridge Road is out by the old research station." She looked at Daisy more carefully now. "Let me check her for a microchip." She ran a scanner over Daisy's shoulders and back. The device beeped and Dr. Pat nodded. "She's chipped. Let's see what we can find out." While the vet typed the chip number into her computer, Tom knelt beside Daisy, who was trembling on the exam table. "You're safe now," he whispered, stroking her head gently. Dr. Pat's sharp intake of breath made Tom look up. "What is it?" he asked. "This dog is registered to Claire Williams," Dr. Pat said, her voice tight. "The environmental scientist who went missing 3 months ago." Tom stood up straight. "Missing? You don't watch the news much, do you?" Dr. Pat asked with a small smile. "Claire was investigating water contamination around here. Her car was found abandoned near the forest edge, but nobody's seen her since. The police searched for weeks." Tom's mind raced back to the conversations he'd overheard at the diner. This must have been what people were talking about. "Her dog went missing too," Dr. Pat continued. "Everyone assumed both Claire and her dog were—" She didn't finish the sentence. Tom looked at Daisy with new understanding. "But someone's been keeping Daisy alive." "Tied up but alive," Dr. Pat nodded slowly, "and hidden deep in the woods where nobody would find her." She began examining Daisy more thoroughly, checking her teeth, eyes, and paws. When she got to Daisy's paws, she paused. "These burns aren't normal," she said, gently turning over one of the dog's front paws. "I've seen something like this before in animals exposed to industrial chemicals, like what they might use at Miller Chemical Storage." Tom asked. Dr. Pat's head snapped up. "How do you know about that place?" "Daisy reacted to the sign when we drove past. Got all worked up," Tom explained. "Interesting," Dr. Pat murmured. She opened a drawer and took out a small evidence collection kit. "I'm going to take some samples from her fur and paws. This might be important." As she worked, Tom pulled out his phone and searched for information about Claire Williams. Dozens of news articles popped up. Her picture showed a woman in her 30s with short brown hair and determined eyes, often holding a water testing kit by various streams and rivers. Many articles mentioned her work exposing illegal chemical dumping by local companies. "Dr. Pat," Tom said slowly, "these articles say Claire was about to publish a big report right before she disappeared. Something about groundwater contamination linked to Miller Chemical." The vet nodded grimly. "She came in with Daisy for a checkup just a week before she vanished. Claire mentioned she was working on something big but seemed nervous. Said she'd been getting strange calls. A knock at the door made them both turn. The receptionist poked her head in. "Tom, there's someone asking about you in the waiting room. Says he saw your truck and wanted to check if everything's okay." Tom felt uneasy. "What does he look like?" "Tall guy in a dark green jacket. Has a county sheriff's badge." Tom and Dr. Pat exchanged looks. "That's Pete Wilson," Dr. Pat said quietly. "He's an old friend of yours, right?" Tom nodded. Pete was one of the few people he trusted in the county sheriff's office. They'd gone to high school together and still went fishing sometimes. "Ask him to come back," Tom said. A moment later, Pete walked in, his uniform neat as always. His eyebrows rose when he saw Daisy. "So this is why you weren't answering your phone," he said to Tom. "I've been calling you." "Battery died," Tom lied, not wanting to admit he'd been ignoring calls while trying to figure things out. Pete looked at Daisy more closely, then at the computer screen showing Claire's information. "Is that—" he began. "Claire Williams' dog," Dr. Pat confirmed. "Tom found her tied to a tree deep in Blackwater Forest today." Pete's face hardened. "Claire's case has been cold for months. We searched everywhere, including those woods." "Not everywhere," Tom said. "Daisy was at least 5 miles from any trail in a spot hunters rarely go." Pete pulled out a small notebook. "Start from the beginning. Tell me exactly what you saw." Tom described finding Daisy, the boot prints, water bowl, and how someone had been watching them leave. He mentioned the black truck that followed them partway to town. "Did you get a plate number?" Pete asked. Tom shook his head. "Too far away, and it was covered in mud." "And you think this connects to Miller Chemical?" Pete asked, his voice careful. "Daisy's got chemical burns," Dr. Pat cut in. "And she reacted to their sign." Pete rubbed his jaw. "Miller Chemical has powerful friends in the county. We can't just accuse them without solid evidence." "What about Claire?" Tom asked. "Doesn't her missing person case warrant another look now that we've found her dog?" Pete sighed. "The case is technically still open, but resources were pulled months ago. The department ruled it most likely that she got lost hiking and—" He trailed off. "But you never believed that," Dr. Pat said, watching Pete's face. "No," Pete admitted. "Claire knew those woods better than most. And her research was making some important people nervous." Dr. Pat finished bandaging Daisy's paws. "She needs antibiotics for these wounds, decent food, and rest. She's dehydrated, but not critically. I'll take her home, Tom said without hesitation. Pete raised an eyebrow. You sure about that? Whoever tied her up might not be happy she's been found. All the more reason to keep her close, Tom replied. Better with me than at the shelter where anyone could claim her. Pete nodded slowly. Fair point. But be careful. I'll stop by your place tonight with the case files on Claire. Maybe there's something we missed. As Tom prepared to leave with Daisy and some supplies Dr. Pat had given him, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Return what you took from the woods. Final warning. Tom showed the message to Pete, whose face darkened. How'd they get your number? Pete asked. No idea, Tom said, feeling a chill run down his spine. Dr. Pat, who had been entering data into her computer, suddenly made a small noise of surprise. What is it? Tom asked. I was just looking at Claire's address on file, she said, turning the screen so they could see. She lived on Pine Ridge Road. The partial address on the note, Tom said. But that's not all, Dr. Pat continued. Her house is less than half a mile from the back entrance of Miller Chemical Storage. The three of them looked at Daisy, who had finally relaxed enough to lie down on the exam table, her eyes still watching them all warily. Someone wanted Daisy kept hidden but alive, Tom said slowly, like they were saving her for something. Or keeping her away from something, Pete suggested. Dr. Pat handed Tom a small plastic bag. These are the samples I took from her fur. There's something unusual mixed in with the dirt, some kind of blue crystal substance I've never seen before. As they walked out to Tom's truck, Pete kept scanning the parking lot and nearby street. I don't like this, he said quietly. First text threat means someone's watching you. They know you have Daisy. Tom helped the dog into his truck. So what do? We don't know who to trust at the department, Pete said. For now, go home, lock your doors, and wait for me. I'll bring everything I have on Claire's case. As Tom drove away, he noticed Daisy was sitting up straighter now, looking out the windows alertly. In his rearview mirror, he saw Pete talking on his phone, his face serious. The text message kept playing in his mind. Return what you took from the woods. Final warning. They didn't just want Daisy back. They wanted to make sure she stayed hidden. The question was, what did Daisy know that made her so dangerous? Tom's small cabin sat at the end of a long gravel driveway, surrounded by tall pine trees that shielded it from the main road. He'd built most of it himself over the years, adding rooms as he needed them. It wasn't fancy, but it was home. As he pulled up, he scanned the area carefully. The threatening text message had left him jumpy, seeing danger in every shadow. Nothing looked out of place, but he still felt uneasy. Come on, Daisy, he said, helping the dog down from his truck. Let's get you settled. Inside, Tom filled a bowl with water and placed it on the kitchen floor. Daisy sniffed it cautiously before drinking. He opened a can of chicken soup, the only soft food he had until he could buy proper dog food, and poured it into another bowl. Daisy ate slowly at first, then with more enthusiasm. While she ate, Tom checked all the doors and windows, making sure they were locked. He took his hunting rifle from its case, loaded it, and placed it near his favorite chair by the window that overlooked the driveway. The sun was beginning to set when headlights appeared, cutting through the trees. Tom tensed, reaching for his rifle, but relaxed when he recognized Pete's police cruiser. Pete carried a cardboard box filled with folders as he walked to the door. His uniform was gone, replaced by jeans and a flannel shirt. Off duty, but still working. Anyone follow you? Tom asked as he let his friend in. Don't think so, Pete said, setting the box on the kitchen table. How's our witness doing? Daisy had retreated to a corner of the living room, watching them with wary eyes. Better, Tom said. Eating and drinking. Still scared. They sat at the table as Pete opened the box. I copied everything we had on Claire's case. Officially, I'm not supposed to have these files at home. Thanks for risking it, Tom said. Something never felt right about how quickly the department dropped this case, Pete replied, spreading out folders. Claire Williams, 34, environmental scientist working for the state, reported missing by her research partner when she didn't show up for a scheduled water sampling. Pete pulled out a map marked with red dots. These are all the sites Claire was testing before she disappeared. Notice anything? Tom studied the map. The dots formed a pattern along streams and rivers, but they clustered heavily around one area. They all lead toward Miller Chemical, Tom said. And away from it, Pete added. She was tracking contamination upstream and downstream. He pulled out more papers, lab reports filled with scientific terms Tom couldn't understand. Her last samples showed dangerous levels of chemicals used in manufacturing, stuff that causes birth defects, cancer, the works. And 3 days after she filed these reports, she vanished, Tom said, seeing the dates. Pete nodded grimly, along with her dog. Her car was found here. He pointed to a spot on the map near the forest edge. Keys still in the ignition, driver's door open. Like she was pulled from the car, Tom said. That's what I thought, Pete agreed. But my boss said it looked like she'd stopped to go hiking and got lost. Search teams combed that area for days but found nothing. Tom thought about where he'd found Daisy. They were searching the wrong section of forest. She was much deeper in, where nobody goes except a few hunters. Pete pulled out crime scene photos of Claire's car. Nothing seemed unusual until Tom noticed something. What's that blue stuff on the ground by the driver's door? He asked, pointing. Pete looked closer. I don't know. It was never mentioned in the report. Tom remembered what Dr. Pat had said. Blue crystals like what was in Daisy's fur. They looked at each other, the same thought forming. I need to call Dr. Pat, Tom said, reaching for his phone. Before he could dial, headlights swept across the window. But these weren't coming up the driveway, they were moving through the trees off-road. Were you expecting someone? Pete asked, his hand moving to where his gun would normally be. No, Tom said, grabbing his rifle. He turned off the kitchen light, plunging the cabin into darkness. Daisy was suddenly alert, a low growl rumbling in her throat as she stared at the door. The vehicle stopped just out of sight. Car doors opened and closed. Footsteps crunched on fallen leaves. Back door, Tom whispered. If we have to run, Pete nodded, gathering the most important files and shoving them into his jacket. Tom's phone vibrated. Another text from the unknown number. Last chance. The dog or your life. Someone knocked on the front door. 3 sharp raps that made Daisy's growl deepen. Tom and Pete froze, not daring to breathe. Sheriff's Department, called a voice that neither of them recognized. We need to speak with Tom Reynolds. Pete shook his head in warning. This wasn't official police business. His own department would have contacted him first. The knocking came again, harder this time. We know you're in there, Reynolds. Open up! Tom pointed to the back door, mouthing go to Pete. Then he whistled softly to Daisy, who crept toward him. The sound of breaking glass came from the bedroom. Someone was trying to get in through a window. Run! Tom hissed. They rushed out the back door into the darkness of the forest behind the cabin. Tom knew these woods better than anyone. Even in the dark, he could find his way. My car's too far, Pete whispered as they crouched behind a large tree. They'll see us if we try for it. We don't need it, Tom replied. There's an old hunting cabin about 2 miles from here. We can hole up there. Shouts came from the house as their escape was discovered. Flashlight beams cut through the trees, searching. This way, Tom said, leading them deeper into the forest. Daisy stayed close to his side, moving with surprising energy for a dog that had been tied up and malnourished just hours ago. They moved as quietly as possible, using the trees for cover. Behind them, voices called out, getting fainter as they put distance between themselves and the pursuers. After 20 minutes of careful movement, Pete touched Tom's arm, pointing back the way they had come. A glow was visible through the trees. They've set fire to my cabin, Tom said, his voice hollow with shock. These aren't ordinary criminals, Pete said grimly. This is about something bigger than a missing scientist. They're destroying evidence and trying to silence anyone who might find it. They pushed on, the smell of smoke fading behind them. Daisy seemed to gain strength as they traveled, her nose working the air constantly. When they reached a small stream, the dog suddenly changed direction, pulling at Tom's pant leg. What is it, girl? He asked. Daisy whined and tugged again, clearly wanting them to follow her. Pete and Tom exchanged looks. Should we trust her? Pete asked. She belonged to Claire, Tom said. And she's the only solid connection we have to what happened. They followed Daisy as she led them along the stream, moving with purpose now. After another mile, they could see a small structure through the trees, the hunting cabin Tom had mentioned. Wait, Pete whispered, pulling Tom down. What if they know about this place too? Tom hadn't considered that. Let me check it out first. He crept forward alone, rifle ready. The cabin appeared empty, no signs of disturbance. Still he approached cautiously, circling it once before trying the door. It was locked just as he had left it months ago. Using the key hidden under a rock by the chimney, he opened the door and swept the interior with his flashlight. Everything was untouched. He signaled to Pete, who hurried over with Daisy. Inside, Tom lit an oil lamp, keeping the light low so it wouldn't be visible from outside. The cabin was basic. One room with a small wood stove, a table, 2 chairs, and a narrow bed. "We should be safe here for the night," Tom said, latching the door. Pete spread the saved files on the table while Tom found some canned food and bottled water he kept stocked. "Those weren't real sheriff's deputies," Pete said as he sorted through papers, "but they had badges and probably uniforms. That means someone in the department is involved." "Your boss?" Tom asked. Pete nodded slowly. "Maybe." He was quick to close Claire's case. As they talked, Daisy began scratching at a spot near the wood stove, whining urgently. "What's she doing?" Pete asked. Tom moved the lamp closer. "There's nothing there, girl. Just the floor." But Daisy persisted, scratching harder at one particular floorboard. Tom knelt down, running his hands over the rough wood. One board moved slightly under his touch. It was loose. "Help me with this," he said to Pete. Together they pried up the floorboard. Beneath it was a small waterproof bag. "That wasn't there before," Tom said, confused. "I've owned this cabin for years." Pete carefully opened the bag. Inside was a notebook, a USB drive, and a small vial of blue crystals identical to what they had seen in the photos and on Daisy. The notebook had Claire Williams's name written on the first page. They looked at Daisy, who had stopped whining and was watching them calmly now. "She knew it was here all along," Pete said in amazement. "Claire must have hidden it here before she disappeared. And somehow trained Daisy to find it," Tom added. "That's why someone kept the dog alive but hidden." They knew she could lead them to this. As Pete gently turned the pages of the notebook, they realized they were holding the evidence that Claire had died trying to protect, proof of something so dangerous, that powerful people would burn down a house and impersonate police officers to keep it hidden, and now, thanks to a loyal dog and a hunter who had followed his instincts, that evidence was finally coming to light. Dawn light filtered through the small windows of the hunting cabin. Tom hadn't slept much. Neither had Pete. They'd spent most of the night reading Claire's notebook and examining the files Pete had saved from Tom's cabin before it burned down. Daisy slept curled up near the wood stove, her first real rest since Tom had found her tied to the tree. Every so often her legs would twitch as she dreamed and soft whimpers escaped her. "What do you think she's dreaming about?" Tom asked, watching the dog. "Finding Claire, probably," Pete said, rubbing his tired eyes. "Dogs don't forget people they love." Tom nodded, turning back to the notebook open in front of him. Claire's handwriting filled every page. Notes, water test results, and maps showing exactly where each sample was taken. "I can't believe what she found," Tom said quietly. "Miller Chemical has been dumping these blue crystal waste products into the groundwater for years. According to her notes, it's something called hexavalent chromium." "Nasty stuff," Pete agreed. "Causes cancer, liver damage, all sorts of problems. And look at these levels she recorded." He pointed to numbers that, even to Tom's untrained eye, were marked with multiple exclamation points and the word dangerous, underlined several times. "She tracked the contamination all the way to the town's water supply," Tom said, flipping to the last pages of the notebook. "That's why they wanted to stop her. Half the town could be drinking poison." Pete had been reviewing the files he'd taken from the sheriff's office. "There's something else here. Look at these property records. Miller Chemical is owned by a company called Pine Ridge Holdings." "Pine Ridge," Tom repeated, like the address on Daisy's collar. "And guess who owns Pine Ridge Holdings?" Pete continued, showing Tom another document. "Mayor Bill Richards and County Commissioner Greg Taylor." Tom whistled softly. No wonder the sheriff's department dropped the case so quickly. "My boss takes his orders from the county commissioner," Pete said, his face hard with anger. "I've been working for people who covered this up." Tom looked through more of Claire's notes. According to her final entry, she was planning to meet someone the day she disappeared, someone who had inside information about the dumping. "A whistleblower," Pete said. "She doesn't name them, just calls them MK, and says they worked at Miller for 10 years. Pete gathered the papers into a pile. "We need to get this evidence to someone who can do something with it, someone outside the county who can't be bought off." State police? Tom suggested. Maybe, Pete said. But how do we know they haven't been paid off too? These guys have money and connections. Tom's thoughts were interrupted by Daisy, who suddenly jumped up from her sleep, ears alert. She ran to the window, looking out with intense focus. Someone's coming, Pete whispered, reaching for his gun. Tom peered carefully through the dusty glass. Through the trees he could see movement, a person walking slowly, stopping frequently as if searching for something. Just one person, Tom said. Doesn't look like those guys from last night. The figure came closer, a woman in hiking clothes, moving carefully through the underbrush. She was thin and dirty, her clothes torn in places. When she turned toward the cabin, Tom gasped. "Pete," he said urgently. "It's her. It's Claire Williams." Pete rushed to the window. "That's impossible. She's been missing for 3 months." But the woman matched the photos they'd seen in the case files. Same short brown hair, same determined walk, though she moved with a noticeable limp now. Before Pete could stop him, Tom opened the cabin door. Daisy bolted past him, racing toward the woman with joyful barks. The woman froze, then dropped to her knees as Daisy reached her. "Daisy," she cried, hugging the dog as she licked her face frantically. "You found it. Good girl. You found it." Tom and Pete approached slowly, not wanting to frighten her. "Claire Williams?" Pete called. "I'm Deputy Pete Wilson. This is Tom Reynolds. We're here to help." Claire looked up, her face a mix of joy and fear. "How did you find my evidence? How did you know to follow Daisy?" "It's a long story," Tom said. "But your dog led us here. She's one smart animal." They helped Claire into the cabin. She was weak and exhausted, her body thin from months of hiding. A jagged scar ran along her right leg, explaining the limp. "I've been moving through the woods for months," she explained as Tom gave her water and some of their limited food. "Living off what I could find, sleeping in caves, staying away from trails where they might find me." "Who's they?" Pete asked. "Mayor Richards and his men," Claire said. "They caught me meeting with my source at Miller Chemical, Mike Keaton, one of their technicians. They shot him right in front of me." Her voice broke. "They were going to kill me too, but I managed to get away. Got cut up pretty bad on a fence while escaping." "Why didn't you go to the police?" Pete asked. Claire gave him a hard look. "Because your sheriff was with them that night. He was holding the gun." Pete's face went pale. "Sheriff Dawson?" Claire nodded. "I couldn't risk going to the department. Didn't know who to trust, so I ran into the woods with Daisy, found a cave system to hide in, but I knew they'd use dogs to track me, so after a few days I made the hardest decision of my life." She stroked Daisy's head. "I tied her up far away from where I was hiding, left her food and water when I could sneak out to her. I knew they'd be looking for both of us together, not separately. And I trained her to find this place if she ever got free. That's where I hid all my evidence before I went to meet Mike." "Smart thinking," Tom said. "But hard on Daisy." Claire's eyes filled with tears. "Hardest thing I've ever done, but I knew if they found her with me, they'd kill her too. And now, they've burned down my cabin trying to get to us," Tom said. "They're destroying evidence and trying to silence everyone involved." Claire wasn't surprised. "They have millions invested in Miller Chemical. If my findings get out, they'll face criminal charges, lawsuits from everyone who's gotten sick from the water. They'll lose everything." Pete studied the map from Claire's notebook. "We need to get you and this evidence somewhere safe. The State Environmental Agency has an office in the next county. They'll be watching the roads," Claire said. "And my picture has probably been circulated to every police department in the area." Tom thought for a moment. "Maybe we don't need to leave. Maybe we bring the help to us." Pete looked skeptical. "How?" "Dr. Pat," Tom said. "She took samples from Daisy's fur. She's probably analyzed them by now and knows what they are. And we can trust her." He tried his phone, but there was no signal in the cabin. "I'll have to get to higher ground." "I'll go," Pete said. "You stay here with Claire and Daisy. I know a ridge about half a mile east that usually has reception." Tom handed Pete his phone. "Tell Dr. Pat to contact the State Environmental Agency and the federal EPA. Tell her to bring them to the old fire tower. We'll meet them there at noon." After Pete left, Tom and Claire sorted through the evidence, organizing it for a quick handoff when the time came. "Thank you for saving Daisy," Claire said as they worked. "I was so worried about her. Kept having nightmares that they'd found her and—" She couldn't finish. "She's the one who saved us," Tom said. "Smart dog you've got." Claire smiled for the first time. "She was a rescue, you know. Found her half-starved behind a restaurant 3 years ago. Guess she's returned the favor." They packed everything into Claire's waterproof bag. Tom checked his rifle and the small amount of ammunition he had at the cabin. "Do you think they'll try to stop us?" Claire asked. "I think they'll do whatever it takes to keep this quiet," Tom replied honestly. "But we have one advantage. They don't know you're alive. They think they're just chasing me, Pete, and Daisy." An hour later, Pete returned, his face grim. "I got through to Dr. Pat. She's already contacted the EPA. They're sending people, but it'll take time. She also said something about the blue crystals. They're a new chemical compound Miller has been developing. Highly toxic, not even approved for manufacturing yet. That's why they're so desperate to cover it up," Claire said. "They're producing illegal chemicals." Pete nodded, then hesitated before continuing. "There's something else. While I was on the ridge, I saw vehicles at Miller Chemical, big trucks being loaded up. I think they're clearing out, destroying evidence. We need to document it," Claire said immediately. "If we can photograph them in the act." "It's too dangerous," Tom objected. "The fire tower is in the opposite direction. We should head there now, meet the EPA people when they arrive." Claire stood up straight, some of her old determination returning. "I've been hiding in woods and caves for 3 months. My friend was murdered. These people poisoned an entire community and tried to kill me to cover it up. I'm not running anymore." Tom and Pete exchanged looks. "She's right," Pete said finally. "Photos of them clearing out would be powerful evidence, and the fire tower can wait a couple of hours." Tom sighed, knowing he was outnumbered. "Fine, but we're going to be careful. No unnecessary risks." They gathered their things and headed out, Daisy leading the way as if she understood their plan perfectly. Claire moved slower than the men, her injured leg troubling her on the rough terrain, but she never complained. As they neared the edge of Miller Chemicals' property, they could see the activity Pete had spotted. Workers loading drums and equipment onto trucks, supervisors shouting orders, everything moving with urgent haste. "They're running," Claire whispered as they crouched behind thick bushes. "They know they've been exposed." Tom handed her his phone. "Take as many pictures as you can, then we go straight to the fire tower." As Claire began documenting the cleanup operation, none of them noticed the black truck parked just inside the tree line behind them, or the man with binoculars watching their every move. The first shot cracked through the air without warning. Dirt kicked up inches from where Claire was crouching. "Get down," Tom shouted, pulling her to the ground as Pete drew his gun. Daisy growled, her body tense and protective as she positioned herself in front of Claire. "Who's shooting?" Claire whispered, clutching the phone with the evidence photos. Tom peered through the bushes. "Can't tell, but they're in the trees behind us." Another shot rang out, splintering bark off a tree near Tom's head. "They've got us pinned," Pete said. "We need to move." "The fire tower," Tom said. "It's our best chance." "I can't run fast enough," Claire said, glancing at her injured leg. "You don't have to," Tom replied. "We just need to be smarter than them." Pete nodded toward a dense thicket to their right. "If we can make it there, the brush is thick enough to cover our retreat. But we need a distraction." Tom thought for a moment, then removed his bright orange hunting vest. "I'll draw their fire. You two get Claire to the fire tower with the evidence. That's what matters most." "No," Claire objected. "We go together." "There's no time to argue," Tom said firmly. "Pete knows these woods almost as well as I do. He'll get you there." Before anyone could stop him, Tom tied his vest to a branch and tossed it to their left. When the shooter fired at the movement, Tom broke cover in the opposite direction, zigzagging between trees. "Now," Pete hissed, helping Claire up. With Daisy at their heels, they slipped into the thicket as more shots followed Tom. Pete led Claire through the underbrush, staying low. "Tom's a smart woodsman," he assured her, seeing the worry on her face. "He knows how to lose someone in these forests." They moved as quickly as Claire's injury allowed, Daisy staying close, occasionally looking back in the direction Tom had gone. "The tower's about a mile ahead," Pete said after they'd been moving for 20 minutes. "Just past that ridge." Claire clutched the bag of evidence tightly. "Do you think Dr. Pat and the EPA people will really be there?" "Dr. Pat will be," Pete said confidently. "She's not the type to back down. As for the EPA," he shrugged, "we'll see." The fire tower appeared through the trees, an old steel structure rising above the forest canopy. It had been built decades ago to spot wildfires, but was rarely used now that planes and satellites did most of that work. Pete motioned for Claire to wait as he approached the clearing around the tower. No vehicles were visible, no sign of Dr. Pat or anyone else. "We're early," he said, checking his watch. "Or they're late." Claire sank down against a tree, exhaustion clear on her face. "I need a minute," she admitted. Months of hiding and running, the wound on her leg and the stress of the past day were taking their toll. Daisy whined softly, resting her head on Claire's lap. "Good girl," Claire whispered, stroking her fur. "We're almost there." Pete kept watch, his eyes constantly scanning the forest around them. "I wonder if Tom made it," he said quietly. As if on cue, they heard movement in the brush. Pete raised his gun but lowered it when Tom emerged, breathing hard but unharmed. "Lost them in the creek," he said between breaths. "Doubled back a couple times. Don't think they're following, but we shouldn't stay in one place too long." Claire showed him the phone. "I got everything, them loading barrels, papers being burned, the whole operation." "It's all here." Tom nodded, relieved. "Good. Now we just need Dr. Pat and her EPA contacts to show up." They waited, the minutes stretching painfully. Tom and Pete took turns keeping watch while Claire reviewed the evidence one more time, making sure nothing was missing. An hour passed with no sign of help. Then Daisy's ears perked up, her head turning toward the old forest road that led to the tower. "Someone's coming," Tom whispered, raising his rifle. The sound of vehicles grew louder. 2 SUVs appeared, moving slowly along the rough road. One was Dr. Pat's familiar blue Subaru. The other was black with government plates. "That's them," Pete said, standing up to wave. The vehicle stopped and Dr. Pat stepped out, followed by a man and woman in professional attire. "Thank goodness you're all okay," Dr. Pat said as they approached. "I've been so worried." "Your cabin, Tom, I'm so sorry." "It's just a building," Tom said. "Can be rebuilt." "But look who we found." He gestured to Claire. Dr. Pat gasped. "Claire Williams?" "You're alive?" The man from the other vehicle stepped forward, showing identification. "John Parker, Environmental Protection Agency. This is my colleague, Lisa Chen. We understand you have evidence of illegal chemical dumping." Claire handed over her notebook and the USB drive. 3 months' worth of water samples, soil tests and photographs documenting what Miller Chemical has been doing. And now proof that they're destroying evidence. She passed him the phone with the recent photos. Agent Parker reviewed the materials, his expression growing darker. "This is incredibly serious. These toxicity levels," he shook his head. "We need to move fast." "There's more," Pete added. "The mayor and county commissioner own the company through a shell corporation, and our sheriff was involved in attempting to murder Claire and her informant. Agent Chen was already on her satellite phone calling for backup. We need a full team at the Miller Chemical facility immediately. And contact the state police when we need arrests made." "Will they believe us?" Claire asked. "These are powerful people with connections." "Evidence speaks for itself," Agent Parker said, holding up the vial of blue crystals. "And Ms. Chen and I report directly to the regional director. No local official can interfere with our investigation." Within hours, the quiet forest around the fire tower became a hub of activity. EPA hazmat teams, state police, and even FBI agents arrived. Tom, Claire, and Pete gave their statements multiple times as officials built their case. By evening, the news had broken across the county. Mayor Richards, Commissioner Taylor, Sheriff Dawson, and 3 executives from Miller Chemical were in custody. State officials had declared a water emergency for the town, bringing in tanker trucks of clean water while testing continued. Tom, Claire, Pete, and Daisy watched from a distance as agents swarmed the Miller Chemical facility, documenting everything before the evidence could be destroyed. "I can't believe it's finally over," Claire said, her voice thick with emotion. After all these months of hiding, afraid for my life, what will you do now? Tom asked. Claire looked down at Daisy, who hadn't left her side since their reunion. First, recover. Then keep doing what I've always done, protecting the environment. This county's water will need monitoring for years to come. You'll need a place to stay while you recover, Dr. Pat said. My clinic has an apartment upstairs. It's yours for as long as you need it. And I'll be rebuilding my cabin, Tom added. Could use some help designing it better this time. Claire smiled. I might have some ideas about environmentally friendly building materials. Pete, who had been speaking with the state police captain, joined them. They're offering me a job, he said, sounding surprised. Leading a new environmental crimes unit. You should take it, Tom said. You're a good cop, Pete, the kind people need. As night fell, Agent Parker approached their group. We've secured the facility and all the evidence. Miss Williams, your documentation was invaluable. Without it, they might have gotten away with this. I had help, Claire said, looking at Tom, Pete, and Dr. Pat. I wouldn't have made it without them, and without Daisy. She stroked the dog's head lovingly. Smart animal, Agent Parker agreed. The way she led you to the evidence, remarkable. Later that night, as they sat around a campfire near the fire tower, waiting for the all-clear to return to town, Tom reflected on how much had changed in just 2 days. His quiet life had been turned upside down since finding a dog tied to a tree in the forest. You know, he said to Claire, who was sitting beside him with Daisy curled up between them. When I went hunting yesterday morning, I was just looking for deer. Never expected to find all this, Claire smiled. Sometimes the most important discoveries happen when we're looking for something else entirely. In the distance, they could see the lights of EPA trucks still working at the Miller facility, cleaning up decades of pollution. The forest led you to Daisy, Claire continued, and Daisy led you to the truth. Maybe that's how it was supposed to happen. Tom wasn't usually one for believing in fate, but as he looked at the loyal dog who had endured so much to protect her owner and the evidence, he wondered if Claire might be right. One simple act, stopping to help an animal in need, had uncovered a conspiracy, saved lives, and brought justice to an entire community. Either way, he said, watching the sparks from the fire rise toward the stars, I'm glad I took that path through the woods yesterday. Daisy looked up at him, her brown eyes reflecting the firelight as if to say she was glad too.